This is the moment Cardinal George Pell became a free man. After serving more than 400 days in jail, he was driven out of Barwon Prison near Geelong and taken to a monastery in Melbourne's inner east. In a statement released immediately, George Pell said he'd suffered a serious injustice. "I hold no ill will towards my accuser," he said. "I do not want my acquittal to add to the hurt and bitterness so many feel. The point was whether I had committed these awful crimes, and I did not." The quashing of his 5 convictions for the sexual abuse of 2 choir boys nearly 20 years ago ends one of Australia's most contentious cases. His friends have always believed Cardinal Pell was innocent.
I had an understanding of the man, and my knowledge of him was when he said he was innocent, I accepted that.
But Melbourne's Catholic Archbishop said his thoughts were also with the complainant, known only as Witness J.
Have a sense of reaching out to him in care and concern.
The other choir boy in the case died in 2014. His father is heartbroken by the court's decision.
He has expressed disgust at the outcome and he's really struggling to understand it and to accept it.
Prosecutors allege the abuse of the choir boys took place here in the priest's sacristy at St Patrick's Cathedral shortly after a Sunday Mass, within a 5 to 6 minute window. But witnesses testified George Pell would never have been alone in the room, and his usual practice was to greet parishioners on the cathedral steps straight after Mass. The High Court ruled, with that evidence, a jury acting rationally ought to have entertained a doubt as to the Cardinal's guilt, even if they found his accuser to be credible and reliable. The court ordered his convictions be overturned.
The highest court in the land has made its decision, and that must be respected.
While this marks the end of the criminal case, Cardinal Pell and the Catholic Church could face a fresh wave of civil action. The ABC understands at least 10 civil cases are planned, and they can go ahead in the absence of a conviction. As for the Cardinal's former standing, some think his time at the Vatican is now over.
When he turns 80, of course, like all other cardinals, he loses his vote for the Pope.
From a cell to a sanctuary, George Pell is celebrating his first taste of freedom. Sarah Farnsworth, ABC News, Melbourne.
It's been 5 years since the child abuse allegations against Cardinal Pell were first made. He was charged in June 2017 and pleaded not guilty. In a secret trial in September 2018, a jury failed to reach a verdict. 2 months later, a second jury found him guilty on 5 counts of child sex abuse. A ban on reporting of the case was lifted in February last year when prosecutors dropped separate charges against George Pell. Last August, the Victorian Court of Appeal upheld the convictions. The Cardinal's final recourse was last month's High Court hearing, leading to today's acquittal. As Cheryl Hall reports, it's a case that continues to polarise public opinion.
George Pell is the highest-ranking Catholic to face a public trial. His acquittal is a relief for his supporters.
I really wouldn't want to say anything other than just let the judgment speak for itself.
But the ruling has wounded those dedicated to supporting survivors of clerical abuse.
Just devastating after everything that's happened.
Yeah, the court system is a difficult thing, and it just goes to show today that even when you have got a verdict, and then it can still be overturned.
The High Court decision has wiped out 5 years of police investigations and legal proceedings. Lawyers like Greg Craven have long argued the charges should not have gone to court.
A charge which always had a reasonable doubt a mile wide was pushed and hurried forward by sections of the media.
Australia's Catholic bishops welcomed the High Court decision but recognised the acquittal will be devastating for some. Any person with allegations of sexual abuse by church personnel should go to the police. The coronavirus lockdown has prevented Catholics from gathering together, but many are determined to revive their faith.
It's quite a challenge for believers. Many Catholics have lost faith in the leadership of the Church, perhaps not in Pope Francis, but in the local leadership. I think a lot of Catholics have. But that doesn't mean that we've given up on it.
Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews sent a brief message to every single victim and survivor of child sex abuse. I see you, I hear you, I believe you. Trauma services have already reported an influx of calls from child abuse survivors since the High Court decision. Cheryl Hall, ABC News.
Ben Knight is in the Melbourne suburb of Kew, where George Pell is staying. So, Ben, freedom for the Cardinal tonight, but is this now the end of the legal process?
Well, as far as this legal process is concerned, Tam, yes, it is. It's not going to go any further, but there are a number of matters on the horizon, shall we say, that Cardinal George Pell would be well aware of. One, of course, those civil cases that you heard Sarah talking about earlier. But then there's also the question of what the Vatican is going to do. The Vatican announced an investigation and then put it on hold pending the outcome of this court process here in Victoria. The question is whether that investigation at the Vatican would start up again. Well, perhaps we got an indication of that in the comments from Pope Francis just a short time ago, dedicating his morning mass and announcing in a tweet that it would be dedicated to what he called the victims of unjust sentences. And then, of course, you have the findings of the Royal Commission into child sexual abuse, and particularly Case Study 28, the investigation of notorious pedophiles operating in the Diocese of Ballarat. Now, when those findings were published, they were heavily redacted. Pages and pages were blacked out so as not to prejudice future court cases or current court cases. This case involving George Pell was one of those. And now that that's been completed, there is a real push for those findings to be published. Now, interestingly, today we heard from the Commonwealth Attorney-General, Christian Porter, that his view is that things that can be unredacted should be unredacted, that he's started the process and that we could see those findings published in full within weeks. People who are also waiting include people like Steve Blacker. He was a victim of perhaps the most notorious pedophile of all operating in the Catholic Church, Gerald Ridsdale. Last year he won a landmark case against the Church and in fact a record payout for the state of Victoria.
Every day that report remains redacted is a day that someone potentially will continue to suffer unnecessarily. So that report needs to be released so we can sort of move forward and get all that stuff out there.
Steve Blacker. Now, interestingly, Tam, tonight we've just seen a couple of people coming here to the monastery, one tying a ribbon onto the front gate there, which has become a widely recognised symbol of silent protest against abuse within the Catholic Church. But behind those gates is Cardinal George Pell enjoying his first night of freedom in more than 400 days.